Nearly 340,000 cases of murder go unsolved per year worldwide since 1965, according to the FBI's Uniform Crime Report data studied by the Murder Accountability Project. And in today's case, we will be discussing one such case, the Lizzie Borden case. But first, hello, and welcome to the Murder House Radio Show. I'm your host, X. On this show, we will be covering serial killers, mass shooters, disappearances, true crime, and the most deplorable things and people in history. All that good, dark stuff. The Murder House Radio Show will be a radio show / podcast. I'll be uploading videos every Friday at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Once you hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification button and select all to get all notifications if you are viewing on YouTube. Hit the follow button if you are listening on a podcasting platform. So sit down, get comfortable, grab some coffee or whatever your preferred beverage is, turn off the lights, and enjoy the show. Lizzie Andrew Borden was an American woman who was tried and acquitted of the August 4th, 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother in Fall River, Massachusetts. No one else was ever charged with the murders. Lizzie Andrew Borden was born July 19th, 1860 in Fall River, Massachusetts, where she spent her entire life, to Sarah Anthony Borden and Andrew Jackson Borden. Her father, who was of English and Welsh descent, grew up in very modest surroundings and struggled financially as a young man. Despite being a descendant of a wealthy and influential local residents, Andrew eventually prospered in the manufacture and sales of furniture and caskets, then became a successful property developer. The first business never really goes out of business. He was a director of several textile mills and owned a considerable commercial property. He was also president of the Union Savings Bank and director of the Duffery Safe Deposit and Trust Co. At his death, his estate was valued at $300,000, equivalent to $9 million in 2021, and $9,630,000 in 2022. Although, despite his wealth, Andrew is known for his frugality. It was a common accommodation for the wealthy to have plumbing in his home, but he did not have this. It was an affluent area, but the wealthiest residents of Fall River, including Andrew's cousin, generally lived in more fashionable neighborhood, The Hill, which was further from the industrial area of the city. Interesting. So he lived in a more downscaled area, even though he had the means to live in an upscale area. So Borden and her older sister, Emma Lenora Borden, had a relatively religious upbringing and attended Central Congregational Church. As a young woman, Lisa was very involved in church activities, including teaching Sunday school to children of recent immigrants to America. She was involved in religious organizations such as Christian Endeavor Society, for which she served as a secretary-treasurer, and contemporary social movements such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. She was also a member of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Mission. Her mother did pass, and about 3 years after her passing, her father married Abby DeFree Gray. Lisa stated that she called her stepmom Mrs. Borden, and demurred on whether they had a cordial relationship. She did believe that Abby had married her father for his money. Bridget Sullivan, the Borden's 25-year-old live-in maid, who was an immigrant to America from Ireland, testified that Lizzie and Emma rarely ate meals with their parents. In May 1892, Andrew killed multiple pigeons in his barn with a hatchet, believing they were attracting local children to hunt them. Lizzie had recently built a roost for the pigeons, and it had been commonly recounted that she was upset over his killings of the pigeons, though the veracity of this has been disputed. A family argument in July 1892 prompted both sisters to take an extended vacation in New Bedford. After returning to Fall River a week before the murders, Lizzie chose to stay in a local rooming house for 4 days before returning to the family home. Tensions had been growing, you could cut it with a knife, within the Borden family in the months before the murders, especially over Andrew's gifts of real estate to various branches of Abby's family. After their stepmother's sister received a house, the sisters demanded and received a rental property, which they purchased from their father for $1 a few weeks before the murders. They sold the property back to their father for $5,000, which is equivalent to $151,000 in 2021. The night before the murders, John Vickum Moores, the brother of Lizzie and Emma's deceased mother, visited and was invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with his brother-in-law, Andrew. Some writers have speculated that their conversation, particularly about the property transfer, may have aggravated an already tense situation. For several days before the murders, the entire household had been violently ill. A family friend later speculated that mutton left on the stove to use in meals over several days was the cause of this illness. But Abby speculated it was poison, given that Andrew was not a popular man. So, on Thursday, August 4th, 1892, John Moores arrived in the evening of August 3rd and slept in the guest room that night. After breakfast the next morning, at which Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, John, and the Borden's maid, Bridget, were present, Andrew and John went to the sitting room, where they chatted for about an hour. Moores left around 8:45 a.m. to buy a pair of ox and visit his niece in Fall River, planning to return to the Borden home for lunch at around noon. Andrew left for his morning walk sometime after 9 a.m. Even though the cleaning of the guest room was one of Lizzie's and Emma's regular chores, Abby went upstairs sometimes between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. to make the bed. According to the forensic investigation, Abby was facing her killer at the time of the attack. She was first struck on the side of the head with a hatchet, which cut her just above the ear, causing her to turn and fall face down on the floor, creating contusions on her nose and forehead. The killer then struck her multiple times, delivering 17 more direct hits to the back of her head, thus ending her life. When Andrew returned home around 10:30 a.m., his keys failed to open the door, so he began knocking. Slovian went to unlock the door, finding it jammed. She uttered curses. She would later testify she had heard Lisa laughing immediately after this. She did not see Lisa, but stated that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. This was considered significant as Abby was already dead by this time, and her body would have been visible to anyone on the home's second floor. Lisa later denied being upstairs and testified that her father had asked her where Abby was, to which she replied that a messenger had delivered Abby a summons to visit a sick friend. Sullivan stated that then removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he laid down on the sofa to take a nap. Sullivan then informed Lizzie of a department store sale. Lizzie said Sullivan was welcome to come along with her, but Sullivan felt unwell and went to take a nap in her bedroom instead. Sullivan testified that she was in her third-floor room, resting from cleaning windows, when just before 11:10 a.m. she heard Lisa call from downstairs. "Maggie, come quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." Andrew was slumped on the couch in the downstairs sitting room, struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon. One of his eyes had been split cleanly in two, suggesting that he had been asleep when attacked. His still bleeding wounds suggested a very recent attack. Dr. Bowen, the family physician, arrived from his home across the street and pronounced both victims dead. Detectives estimated that Andrew's death had occurred approximately around 11 a.m. So as I stated at the beginning of the video, they think that Lizzie Borden was the culprit, but she was later acquitted. But during the investigation, Lizzie Borden's initial answers to the police officers' questions were at times strange and contradictory. Initially, she reported hearing a groan or scraping noises, or a distress call before entering the house. 2 hours later, she told police she had heard nothing and entered the house, not realizing that anything was amiss. When asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby receiving a note asking her to visit a sick friend. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if somebody could go upstairs and look for her. Sullivan and a neighbor, Miss Churchill, were halfway up the stairs, their eyes level with the floor, when they looked into the guest room and saw Abby laying face down on the floor. Most of the officers who interviewed Borden reported that they disliked her attitude. Some said she was too calm and poised. Despite her attitude and changing alibis, she was not checked for bloodstains. Police did search her room, but it was cursory inspection. At the trial, they admitted to not doing a proper search because Borden was not feeling well. They were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence. In the basement, police found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. The hatchet head was suspected of being the murder weapon, as the break in the handle appeared fresh and the ash and dust on the head, unlike that of the other bladed tools, appeared to have been deliberately applied to make it look as if it had been in the basement for quite some time. However, none of these tools were removed from the home. Because of mysterious illness that had stricken the household before the murders, the family's milk and Andrew's and Abby's stomachs, removed during the autopsy, were tested for poison, but nothing was found. Residents suspected Lizzie of purchasing hydrochloric acid in a diluted form from the local drugstore. Her defense was that she was inquired about the acid in order to clean her furs, so she did buy it, despite the local medical examiner's testimony that it did not have antiseptic properties. That's interesting. What do you guys think so far? Lisa's and Emma's friend, Alice Russell, decided to stay with them the night following the murders, while Moore spent the night in the attic guest room. Police were stationed around the house on the night of August 4th, during which an officer said he had seen Borden enter the cellar with Russell, carrying a kerosene lamp and a slop pail. He stated he saw both women exit the cellar, after which Borden returned alone. Though he was unable to see what she was doing, he stated it appeared she was bent over the sink. On the 5th of August, Moores left the house and was mobbed by hundreds of people. Police had to escort him back to the house. On the 6th of August, police conducted a more thorough search of the home, inspecting the sisters' clothing and confiscating a broken-handled hatchet head. That evening, a police officer and the mayor visited the Bordens, and Lizzie was informed that she was a suspect in the murders. The next morning, Russell entered the kitchen to find Borden tearing up a dress. She explained that she was planning to put it on the fire because it was covered in paint. It was never determined whether it was the dress she had been wearing on the day of the murders. So there was a trial and all that, but as I mentioned, she was acquitted due to lack of evidence and whatnot. She did live out the rest of her life in her hometown. After the trial, the Borden sisters moved into a large and modern house in the Hill neighborhood in Fall River. Around this time, Lisa began using the name Elizabeth A. Borden at their new house, which Elizabeth dubbed Maple Croft. They had a staff that included live-in maids, a housekeeper, and a coachman, because Abby was ruled to have died before Andrew. Her estate went first to Andrew, and then, at his death, passing to his daughters as part of his estate. A considerable settlement, however, was paid to settle claims by Abby's family. Despite the acquittal, Borden was ostracized from Fall River society, so shunned. Her name was again brought into the public's eye when she was accused of shoplifting in 1897. In her later years, Borden fell ill. Her last year following the removal of her gallbladder, she died of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927 in Fall River, the town she was born in. Funeral details were not published, and few attended. 9 days later, Emma died from chronic nephritis at the age of 79 in a nursing home in Newmarket, New Hampshire. Having moved to this location in 1923, both for health reasons and to avoid renewed attention following the publication of another book about the murders. The sisters, neither of whom have ever married, were buried side by side in the family plot at Oak Grove Cemetery. And at this time, this case still remains unsolved. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Do you think that she did it? I think there's a good 75% chance at least that she did it or had some major hand in it. But let me know down in the comments below. So that is the case of Lizzie Borden. Thank you for listening to this episode on the Murder House Radio Show. I hope you have a good rest of your Friday or whenever you are listening to this. Make sure to check out the social medias and the sources in the description below. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit the bell notification and select all if you are viewing on YouTube. Make sure to hit follow if you are listening on a podcasting platform. But until next time, this is your host X, signing off.